It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with Your Personal Bank. Now here's Ference Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. I'll tell you what, I saw an article actually this morning that the title of it just got my attention, and it's from Dr. Fauci, and it says, U.S. has independent spirit, but now's the time to do what you're told. Now, I don't know about you, but that kind of puts the hairs on the back of my neck on end. Any guys, you know what I'm talking about. Anybody's married or your partner, if you told your wife or partner you demanded something, pretty much we all know how well that goes over. And by the way, ladies, us guys don't like getting told what to do either that well. So you know what I'm trying to say. My point is really simple, and I'm going to get, and you're going to see what I'm talking about, how this affects your money and all. We're going to talk about this because I think there's a significant situation happening that could definitely affect our money, and it has to do with the potential. There's the potential lockdowns that are coming again. There are some folks on the Biden team who are part of this coronavirus task force who have already floated the trial balloon out there of doing a nationwide lockdown for 4 to 6 weeks. And ever since that kind of came out, and folks, here's the thing you need to know about Washington, if you don't already know, they're very attuned to perceptions and images and how people think and all that kind of stuff. These things aren't generally shared by accident. In other words, when a member of the task force comes out, occasionally mistakes are made or unscheduled things are done. But generally speaking, I worked in Washington when I was in the military. This is several decades ago. I wasn't any of the higher. I was in the military, but you saw this is nothing new. Okay. My point is a lot of this stuff, again, is not by accident. Somebody else, like this Corona task force member, will throw out a trial balloon to see what the reaction is with people. Well, ever since then, we're seeing a flood of news articles and different things coming out talking about potential for needing another shutdown. And what they're talking about, though, this time is not just the shutdown like we had previously. One of the other articles I was reading used an example. I think it said in Minnesota, the shutdown in that state, something like 87% of all jobs were considered essential. So, in other words, the vast majority of jobs were not shut. They just didn't shut down that much. Arizona was kind of similar in that way. A lot of states were. And what they're talking about is one where it would be a much harder shutdown, more akin to probably what we saw in Europe, like in Italy or something. And they're even talking about basically nobody working for 4 to 6 weeks and the government paying everybody's salaries in essence, that kind of thing, so that the economic situation would be far more reduced from what it was from the shutdowns we saw this spring. So this could be very significant. Also, that we're also seeing a number of like the college football teams are already announcing they're shutting down, not playing this weekend. And I think Maryland and some others are already talking about or have about shutting down for the season now. Chicago and some other places have already, talked about canceling Thanksgiving. So my point is there's definitely a move afoot to get the perception and get people to move towards the idea of a hard shutdown sometime in the near future. And like this one article points out, how does this affect your money if this does indeed happen? Well, like Yahoo Finance is a good example. One of them talks about the Dow dropping nearly 4,000 points, one of their strategists. I've seen some other articles similar. I have no idea what the markets would do, but I've got to believe that, and I think any reasonable person would agree with this, is that if we do have a national shutdown, much stronger or more than we had in the spring, it's definitely going to affect the economy in significant ways that are mostly not good. And that's going to affect the markets significantly, obviously, in a big, big way. It's just, it's hard to say. And the thing is, what is really going to happen? I mean, we've had a very contentious election, a very close election. We have recounts happening. We won't know until January 5th, by the way, which party is actually going to be in control of the Senate, because we have 2 Senate runoffs. There's so much uncertainty, and I guess I'm starting to sound like a broken record this year in 2020, and it kind of goes against the grain of what I'm normally an optimistic, upbeat kind of guy. I mean, generally speaking, are upbeat about the future and the markets and the economy and our country and all these kinds of things. And again, not to sound like a broken record, but 2020 has certainly been full of unexpected things. And these things have definitely had major implications on our money, on the economy. How do we plan for the future? What should you do? And we're going to talk about that more today in today's show, of course. But I guess the one overarching theme would want anyone listening to take away from this, and it's not a new story. It's not a new theme. I've been sharing this for over 20 years in my career, and that is having some money set aside that's guaranteed, has some ability, access, liquidity, can grow, it's got some safety, some reserves is key. And based on what may happen, is increasingly looking like may happen, that could be very, very significant. We're going to have if this does happen, we're going to have a tremendous shift in the markets. People moving their money around. We'll hear a lot about moving to cash and things like that. But again, if you want to protect yourself, your personal bank is a great place to do that, a place to store your money. You'll have access, liquidity to most of it. You got some guarantees, you got some tax benefits, you have access to the funds to take advantage of the future opportunities, which I do believe will also happen. It's not all doom and gloom and bad news. Of course, when things move one way, eventually they're going to move back the other, right? Or, I'm getting this more and more. I'm running this a lot more with folks, is they're just getting tired of it all. And if that's you're just getting tired of worrying about what's going to happen and what's happening to your money, and you want a place where it can just grow and be consistent and have some safety, your personal bank is a good place to look. If maybe not all of it, maybe, but certainly a portion of your portfolio. Does it make sense to have it set aside in that kind of situation? And in a lot of cases, the answer is yes, absolutely, because you're just sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you know what I'm saying. There's just, again, for a lot of folks, it's just been, all of this is just getting to be too much. And you know what I'm trying to say. So, like I said, my point is, I'm going to talk about this further today's show, about some of the things and what we can do to protect our money in these uncertain, these choppy waters, all this stuff that's happening that, frankly, in many cases, a lot of things have been happening, frankly, are quite unprecedented. I mean, in our history as a country even, we've had pandemics, but what we haven't had is the government's involvement in the shutdowns and things like that to the level that we've seen this year. All that is completely unprecedented. And that, again, comes into an area of frustration sometimes, because with a national lockdown, this is a personal pet peeve and a frustration, I think, of many people. It takes the view of a national situation, doesn't break it down to what individual states and different regions of the country. I mean, perfect examples. We had a scenario where in June here in Arizona, we had a surge of coronavirus, where a lot of other parts of the country were reducing, and a lot of it, like people say, when people are going indoors, that's when the cases, spike, right? Well, in June, a lot of the other parts of the country, summer's here, they're going outside, they're enjoying the weather. Here in Phoenix, we're going inside. It's the opposite. And so if you do a national shutdown because, Chicago or New York, because people are going inside and numbers are going up, well, that doesn't really apply for Arizona or Florida or Texas very well, because frankly, we're doing the opposite. We're starting to go outside more because our weather's nice now. So again, this national top-down approach is very frustrating, because this country, we are a large country. We have a lot of different regions and different scenarios. And that's, again, where I think each individual state should have more leeway. So I'm hopeful, at least that's a personal standpoint, I'm hopeful a national shutdown doesn't occur, because I think that would be devastating for our economy. It'd be devastating for a lot of people. A lot of people just sick and tired of being sick and tired, if you know what I'm saying. Obviously, if you're high risk and those kinds of things, absolutely. I've said this from the beginning. Should you, shelter and protect yourself? Yeah, absolutely. If you're, and I started wearing masks personally when I was inside around other people, at least 2 or 3 weeks before uh, mask mandates were put in place here in Arizona, for example. Because again, from my perspective, early on was where the risk was higher because there was a lot less known about this virus. And because of those unknowns, what was going to happen? That's the kind of thing, that's the situation I'm trying to get at is it was because of the unknown, not knowing how severe it was, how, there are viruses that have been out there. I remember some of these like Ebola and some of these others that had upwards of a 10% fatality rate if you got it. Well, that's significant. That's serious. And early on, back in April or March, April, whatever, we didn't know enough about coronavirus to know how serious it was. To me, that was the time to take precautions, more so than now, where even the medical community repeatedly says, look, we understand this virus far more than we ever did. We know how to treat it. We have therapeutics now we didn't have back then. We have a vaccine we've got good news on the vaccine front. It looks like it's going to be effective and going to be available in the near future. So what I'm trying to say is to put down a hard shutdown now when it may not really apply for different regions of the country very effectively, when we have a far more robust medical response. I mean, I don't think any reasonable person can argue that the death rates have dropped significantly. I've seen stuff that somewhere in the range of 80% less likely to die from this now if you're in the hospital than if you were in the hospital back in March or April. Again, because of better medical treatments, therapeutics, various other things. So my point is the risk now is far less than it was back in March and April. So why are we looking at almost a complete shutdown, and which will be frankly devastating, not to mention economically, but personally? And what about all these people who have been shut down and locked down for all this time and are already depressed and frustrated? All that's just going to exacerbate the problem. So my point is, I fervently hope this doesn't happen, but unfortunately, more and more I'm seeing with the the media and the news and what's going on out there, they're quickly moving this direction so far at this point. And of course, that'll have a tremendous impact on our money and the economy. So I'm going to recommend you staying tuned in the next segment. We're going to talk about this further, as always, and don't miss it. So stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com.
Today, we're really talking about, potential lockdowns occurring again. Again, as you heard in the first segment, I find this a little frustrating. If we do go into a national lockdown situation, as more and more people are talking about, this could be certainly devastating to our economy. Again, just looking at it from the small business front, for example, I mean, small business has really taken it on the chin this year in many ways, particularly places that service-oriented type of businesses that require face-to-face, activity to do their business. Obviously restaurants and salons and things like that come to mind first and foremost, but there's many other businesses like that. And, they've been kind of on their, a lot of them have been running on fumes. There's a number have gone out of business already. Now, I've heard some people being more callous about it, and this is true. Any economic downturn, the weaker players are going to fall to the side. And that's sort of the natural progression of things. And there's the pruning of the weaker players is actually a healthy process. Unfortunately, with this time, it wasn't caused by any economic scenario. It was a government basically forcing shutdowns. There was some assistance, okay, and that did help. But that didn't help a lot of businesses, particularly your more smaller mom and pops, those types of businesses. And, the Small Business Administration has repeatedly said that something like half the employment of America is to small business. So, of course, our unemployment rates jumped up. It's come back some, but we're still at relatively high unemployment rates. If we do another shutdown, what's that going to do? I mean, a lot of the small businesses that are still have survived all of this so far are running on fumes. There hasn't been another stimulus package. Not that, frankly, personally, I wish the government wouldn't get so involved. I've shared this before. I'm very much of an independent type of person, but they did force the shutdown. So, I can understand the need for it. But my thing is, if there is a hard shutdown, like they're talking about, well, we got plenty of money. This I find frustrating too. One of the things in terms of the talking about a nationwide shutdown, I forget the name, but one of the coronavirus task force members has said, basically we have plenty of money to pay for people's, salaries and all this kind of stuff through all that, which is all well and good, I guess. I just think that's just going to be another blow to small business in particular. That's going to, when we do finally emerge from all of this, and it looks like the good news is it's going to be shorter rather than longer, because again, we get some vaccines in place, and those particularly of the higher risk category will be able to, protect themselves, right? And maybe start some form of normal life again. But again, what's the devastation going to be? I've seen some things that are not good news in terms of small business, and that will definitely impact our economy in the long term. Okay, so how's that going to affect our money and such like that? I mean, let's just use a quick example from what we've seen just in the last few months. I've talked about this in some of the previous shows, and I recommend you can go to yourpersonalbank.com, listen to any of the previously recorded shows at any time. But I was talking about how some of the situations where, large businesses really flourished through the situation, particularly with the stay-at-home orders and things like that, the companies that, cater to that type of thing, where others, of course, suffered greatly. But again, what's going to happen when we do emerge from all this? What's our economy going to look like? Is it going to be somewhat reduced total GDP, for example, of what it was before? How long will that last? How will all these things impact? And like I said, what we saw in the last few months, particularly like when the markets were hitting, the S&P and stuff were hitting, breaking records or hitting highs again after, through the summer basically. But when you looked at it a little closer, it was pretty much narrowed down it got to the point where it was narrowed down to a handful of stocks. Excuse me, mostly a handful of tech stocks and stuff. And even at one point, the Dow going up was almost entirely because of Apple at one point. So it wasn't a broad-based rally. It wasn't, so it was actually the stock market was actually reflecting a better view, a more accurate view than what a lot of people realized, because they were just looking at the total number. The broad market wasn't, going up. What's going to happen now? I wish I knew. And if anybody knows how this is going to affect your money, your retirement, your investments, your portfolio, and all those different things, boy, they got a crystal ball, you know what I'm saying? Nobody really knows. That's the problem. And let's throw in the other thing, real estate. I know I have a lot of folks who ask me, and I have a lot of investors, clients who are real estate investors. And there's some great concerns. I've had some discussions with some leaders in the real estate investing industry recently. As part of my role as being the chairman of the board of a bank, banks, particularly community banks like we're in the process of starting, which we're planning to still do, but we're waiting to see how all this shakes out too, obviously. But, banks are heavily involved in, commercial and residential real estate. So a lot of their loans, and that's where they generate a typical bank generates a lot of their business activity from. So banks are very attuned, especially your smaller regional local banks are very attuned to the real estate market. So it's one of the things you have to stay on top of. I can tell you this, one of the greatest fears a lot of the folks in the real estate investment market today have is, what is the impact going to be on real estate after these moratoriums expire? In other words, for a lot of folks, they've been on moratoriums in terms of not having to pay their mortgage or rent, and they haven't been able to be foreclosed on or evicted. At this point, most of those orders expire at the end of the month, end of December, end of the year. What's going to happen if those don't get extended? What's going to happen to, and somebody's got months and months of back. Mortgages can be resolved a little easier because what a bank can do, which I assume many will do, and I've talked to a number of bankers and this is their plan, is they're just going to tack, let's say you had 6 months of back mortgage payments you haven't made. What they're going to do is basically tack on that on the back end of the mortgage. So in other words, add 6 more months to your mortgage, however long it was. That's a relatively easy situation to resolve. The more challenging one is the rent. How do you resolve? You're a landlord. You have a tenant who's been in your property for 6 months or longer. There's maybe 6 or more months behind in rent payments. And now rents become due. The rent moratoriums are gone. The eviction restrictions are gone. Is that rentor going to really come up with that 6 months of back rent? Let's be real. I think in most cases, that's going to be highly unlikely, right? It'd be much easier for that renter just to pack up and go to the next place and rent something else. And in essence, what they've done is pocketed 6 months of back rent. Now, they may have lost their job and all that, so they don't have the money anyway. It wasn't really their fault. I'm not sitting here blaming them, but I'm just saying from a logistic standpoint, as a landlord, what do? I guess you're going to have a big tax write-off, aren't you? It's unlikely you're probably going to be able to collect on most, if any, of that type of money. And for those who their main source of income has been rental income prior to COVID hitting, they've been hit hard. Okay, so, and then let me throw one more thing, and then we'll start talking about some good news. What about student loans? I was talking to a gentleman just a couple days ago about it, and he's paying the student loans for his son. So this just doesn't affect the young people. This affects a lot of the times parents and grandparents who are helping or are paying the student loans off for their kids or grandkids. There's been a moratorium on that until the end of the year. And then there's talk in the Democratic Party about forgiving some or all the student loans. Is that going to happen? How much? Should you make the payment in January? Are they going to forgive it afterwards? The problem is there's no way to know what's going to happen. And it's all these uncertainties. And the term we always hear is the markets abhor uncertainty. Okay? Again, I can't stress this enough. Have some money set aside. Have it safe. Have it guarantees. Have access and liquidity to the money. And if you can get a nice return, like I said, your personal bank, we can get you 6%. Dividends have been paying that for the last 25 years plus and never missed the dividends since before the Civil War. Why not park some money in something like that where it's safe, has some guarantees, have access, tax benefits, and all that, so that when this choppy seas that we're in finally starts to settle down, you can take advantage of the opportunities. Stay tuned. Next segment, we're going to talk about that further.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com.
Potentially getting locked down again. More and more we're seeing, and like I said, I saw this article, and just to be frank with you, it just made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. And the article is, Dr. Fauci says U.S. has independent spirit, but now is the time to do, and I quote, do what you're told. When I saw that, he's right about the first part. We do have an independent spirit as a country. Let's face it. That's how our country was founded. That's what we've built and grown on over the centuries, literally decades and centuries as a country. And yes, it's true. The shutdowns were not as broad based in the spring and summer as maybe some other countries where they just did national shutdowns. It was much more sporadic because it was dependent on which states, and it was more on the governors and all that kind of thing. But that I don't consider that a negative or a weakness. That's actually one of our strengths. And that's why it gets a little frustrating where, do what you're told. Hey guys, I said this in the first segment. Try saying that to your wife or your partner. How well does that go over? Do what you're told. Or, let's face it, gals, same thing. You tell your partner, your husband or partner, that you're probably not going to get a good response. You know what I'm saying? I know I've been going to be married coming out of 20 years coming up here in a few months. And I know if I said that to my wife, I know exactly the response I would get. A dirty look would be the nice response. All right. My point is, if they're really trying, and it looks like they're trying to float this idea of a national lockdown for 4 to 6 weeks to try to shut down the virus, there's a lot of argument in that regard in terms of whether that works or not, particularly because we've seen it done in the Far East. We've seen it done in Europe, and they have had second waves come back strongly anyway. See, what's irritating is, we all know we were told various things early on, the very beginning, even by Dr. Fauci and the CDC, that don't use masks don't work. We come to find out later they were basically lying to us because they were trying to protect the mask supply for the first responders and medical personnel. I understand that, but that's another thing as Americans they don't understand about most of us. I'll put it that way. One, we don't like to be told what to do. I think that's pretty obvious. Secondly, we don't like to be lied to. If they had just come out and were honest and said, look, masks have a benefit. We have this virus coming out, but we have a shortage because our first responders, our doctors, our nurses and stuff need them. So please don't buy them all up. And can we please, help us get more to them? We saw a huge turnout of people sewing masks and stuff like that. If you remember, we respond to challenges really well if we're told the truth and if we're given the situation where it stands. And so I think there's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of anger from a lot of folks because our national leaders, Dr. Fauci included, I'm not saying he's all bad, but there's CDC and various others, have basically flat out lied to us and stopped treating us like little kids. Give us the situation, what needs to be done. So I think what's happened because of all these different things that they've done and the situation has been, I believe there's going to be a lot of pushback if they try to accomplish a national lockdown. And frankly, in my opinion, there should be. So secondly, I've said this in the first segment, having a shutdown nationally probably makes no sense because we're a big country. We have different regions. We have different, seasons. For example, here in Arizona, we had like I pointed out, we had our big spike in June, which is actually, by the way, the time that most people are indoors in Arizona because it just gets hot. Other parts of the country had their spikes at different periods of time because the weather is different. Okay, so our summer and your winter, depending on what part of the country you live in, is a big difference. So people are out and about a lot more here in Arizona and Florida and Texas and stuff in the winter because the weather's nice. So again, doing a national top-down, heavy-handed, boom, we're going to do this, I don't think it's going to go over real well. Okay, let's see what happens. My hope is it doesn't go over real well because being, what is it, as Dr. Fauci says, do what we're told. I hope our country hasn't come to that. Now, at the same time, if somebody's high risk, by all means, I've said this from the beginning, should they protect themselves? Absolutely. But don't destroy our lives. Don't destroy our economy. Don't destroy everything by this heavy-handed approach. By the way, another point on all of this I find very frustrating. I guess I'm ranting a little today, and I apologize. But I'll tell you what I said when I saw that Dr. Fauci, do what you're told. I'm not kidding. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That just got my dander up. Okay, because here's the other thing about all this, and all pretty much across the board, all the people that are talking about we're going to do these shutdown, for the most part, are people that are going to continue to get paid whether we have a shutdown or not. Right? Has Dr. Fauci missed a paycheck? I doubt it. Try running a business. Try working. You have a job for a small business, by the way, which approximately 50% of Americans do. And these businesses get affected by these shutdowns in various ways. And now folks either lose hours, lose their jobs altogether, business owners left and right losing their businesses. And many times these are things that, like a small business owner, for example, oftentimes is something they've worked on for, well, their entire working life. This is not just a paycheck to them. This is not just for many of these small business owners in particular. This is a mission. This is their passion. And maybe they've worked on this for decades and decades even. And now you're taking away, through no fault of their own, something that they've put their blood, sweat, and tears in for years and years and years, decades in often cases. This kind of stuff has a major, major impact on people. And not just in dollars and cents. Obviously, with money, absolutely, has massive, I think, well, we'll see. But I've seen a lot of economists and folks talk about where when we emerge from all this, and hopefully that's sooner rather than later, we've got some good news on that front with a vaccine. Hopefully that helps alleviate a lot of this stuff sooner rather than later. But there's a lot of talk about our economy. It's going to be very different because of one thing, if, I don't know, 30, 40, 50% of the small businesses that are no longer around after COVID, all this is over, that we're around, how's that going to impact things? It's going to be a significant impact, okay? And you got to consider this when you're thinking about your money, you're thinking about investing, you're thinking about retirement or something for the future, okay? How is that going to impact your money and what you're doing? And not, we saw this recently, a lot of people pouring monies into a few key large companies, particularly a lot of tech stocks, because they were surviving the stay-at-home economy better, but there's only so much of that, you know what I'm trying to say? So like I said, there is so much, and I don't like saying this. I don't like feeling this. I don't like feeling so much uncertainty. By the way, most people misunderstand when I talk about the personal bank and the safety and the guarantees and all that. Most often, historically, how I've been using it and many of my clients and how it's used is really to have a storehouse of money and liquid and access with tax benefits so that you can take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves, which is a good, positive, moving forward, upbeat kind of approach, right? We've had to use it more and more, particularly this past year, understanding that you want to have some money in reserve just in case because of uncertainty, okay, which it does a great job of that, frankly. But my point is it's both. And when we have these periods of change, and I guess that's what it boils down to, is we're going through a very big change economically due to COVID and the shutdowns. It will create situations that challenges, and it's certainly going to create opportunities. And if you're fortunate enough to identify what some of those opportunities are, and you have the financial wherewithal, the access to the funds, you can take advantage of those. Awesome. And again, Your Personal Bank, contact us at yourpersonalbank.com for more information on this. Can give you that warehouse, that storehouse of funds that, hey, when you're waiting, hey, why not 6% dividends? That's not half bad, tax-free, access, not a bad situation. And then when that opportunity presents itself, you can pull the trigger. Stay tuned in the next segment, and we'll talk about that further.
Back to the year. For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com.
All right, we're rounding third, and we're wrapping this up today. And like I said, today mostly, and I apologize, I've been frustrated. And like I said in the other segments, the thing that frustrated me was this article I saw, Dr. Fauci, and this is a quote: "U.S. has independent spirit, but now's the time to do what you're told." And I'm sorry, folks, but that just got my dander up. Okay, got me frustrated because I don't like being told what to do. And I think a lot of Americans, a lot of people fit into that category. Even Dr. Fauci mentioned that. What they're referring to and they're trying to accomplish here, it looks like more and more, is a national shutdown for 4 to 6 weeks. Of course, we've heard that before. We were told in March, April, we just needed a shutdown for 4 to 6 weeks. And what is this, 6, 8 months later, we're still talking about shutdowns? And I guess that's the other thing when you follow the science and things like that. Other countries had had restrictive shutdowns. Italy comes to mind, for example. And now they're having a second wave. Shutdowns don't stop the virus. I can't tell you how many medical professionals who point that out. Shutdowns can delay it. It can spread it out. It can bend the curve was the term. And that's what we were told originally. And most people, I think, initially, including myself, got on board with that. So we wouldn't overwhelm our medical facilities. That we all understood that, and we were willing to make that sacrifice. But we did. We bent the curve significantly, which is great. Kudos. But then they kept going. And that's the problem with government. Now they're looking at basically trying to shut down the virus. Well, you can't. Several doctors I've talked to, my personal physician even has said, look, here's the bottom line. It's a highly contagious disease. You're going to get it sooner or later. Bottom line. The best thing you can do, and this is the frustrating part, he's absolutely right, is the best thing you do is do things to boost your immune system. That means all the stuff we all know we should do. Exercise, eat right, get sleep, right? Take your vitamins, all this stuff, right? Do the things you need to do. And how much of why isn't a Dr. Fauci or anybody else coming out and talking about, hey, folks, get healthier? I mean, here's a dirty little secret. I know this isn't politically correct, but we have had a high level of cases compared to many parts of the world and deaths. But, the dirty little secret is one of the comorbidity. I mean, they pointed out if you have underlying health issues, your cause of death is much more likely to die from this. And one of the major causes of comorbidity is being obese. We have one of the highest obese rates in the country, right? Why haven't we heard about that? Why hasn't our medical community said, look, folks, this is a highly contagious disease. And if you're of a higher risk category, yes, you should protect yourself, but also you should do the things you need to do to get healthier. Okay? Do the things you need to do to boost the immune system. We all know what that is. Again, eat right, exercise, get your sleep. And the reality is, if you wanted to reduce, would that be as effective, or if not, probably more so? I would venture to say, and I'm not a medical person, but let's be real. How much more effective would that approach be than everybody wearing a mask and shutting down all the time? Why not just work on getting healthier? Yes, take the necessary steps to social distance and wear masks when you're inside and it's crowded and things like that. Be smart. But why not look at that instead of these top-down, heavy-handed approaches, shutting everything down, destroying people's lives, destroying the economy, destroying people's businesses? I understand Washington loves power. I get that. But there's consequences to these decisions and the actions. And that's why I get so, I guess I've just got so frustrated today. I'll tell you that much. I hope and pray that this doesn't happen. I hope that there's enough pushback from people and some common sense that targeted shutdowns could make some sense. People with high risk could make some sense. Focus on boosting the immune system, getting healthier makes a lot of sense. But we don't need to destroy people's lives over all this. Now, if they go down this route, of course, it's going to impact the economy, like some of these articles talk about. Some of these, if they shut it down, I see here would drop nearly strategists saying the Dow would drop 4,000 or more points or more, at least. I think if they do shut down the economy hard, it would we saw what happened in March to the markets. We could see some tremendous moves. Now, it came back really strong, really fast. And that was a surprise for most everybody also. But remember, there was also a significant stimulus package that happened about that same time. In other words, a lot of Americans got checks, didn't they? The government just sent them a check. And a lot of businesses got PPP funds and various things, which not only helped the businesses. Here's the thing. For many businesses, their number one expense is employees, payroll. Well, when the PPP came in and took care of the payroll, what it did is it took that expense off the table for that business. Now, if that company lost customers, that helped offset it. That was great. But there were a lot of businesses that survived through the process, through the whole thing, and some of them even increased, okay? So suddenly their payroll, their largest expense, is off the table. The government's covering it for them for 3 or 4 months, right? And their business is going along as well, if not better than it was before. All of a sudden, some of these business owners sitting on a bunch of money. So there's some that really struggle, don't get me wrong, but there's others that really flourished. Did they have money to put in the markets and saw a buying opportunity? Absolutely. Is that cycle going to repeat itself? Are we going to see where if the markets drop hard because of a shutdown like we saw in March? We saw a 30% drop in 30 days in the S&P, for example. And then we had a strong comeback. Are we going to see that again? Is it going to repeat itself? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. And again, that's why having some funds set aside. You don't have to ride the roller coaster is what I'm trying to say. You don't have to play that game all the time. Nobody's forcing you on that ride. Guess what? There's another ride. There's another option in town. I guess why I do this show and try to educate people and help them understand there is another option. You can put your money in an account that's been paying 6% dividends and has so for the last 25 plus years and never missed since before the Civil War. Long-term consistent dividends. Or we can put you in an index account where you can get 13% in an up year and only make and have 1% on a down year floor. The worst case scenario is you'll make 1%. Okay? We have accounts like that. Oh, by the way, we can set them up so they're tax-free. We can set them up so they have access to most of the money, upwards of as high as 85% of the money available day one. All right? We can set up these kinds of accounts. Oh, and by the way, don't forget, we can set them up where you have a death benefit protection just in case something happens prematurely, and so that your loved ones are taken care of, or your business will handle, business succession planning, okay? We can handle those kinds of things. And don't forget, there's living benefits included to take care of things like, critical, chronic, terminal illness types of situations or long-term expenses, okay? This is all built in. There's no additional cost to this stuff, okay? It's all built into how it's set up. It's not a bad option to consider. In fact, it's a great option to consider. And most of the time, and I'm talking the vast majority of the time, when I talk to people about this and we actually go into it and see how it works for them, most are moderately, if not pleasantly surprised. And frankly, most of them get pretty excited about what they can do with your personal bank and how it can make a difference and how it can enhance their financial situation and how it can also protect against the uncertainties and the choppy waters that we've been dealing with, frankly, for most of this year. And I don't know how much longer, but certainly some period going forward. This is an option worth looking at. This is an option worth considering. Contact us at yourpersonalbank.com. I'll be happy to talk to you about it. Look at your situation. There's no cost or obligation. And I would venture to say you're going to learn a tremendous amount of how your financial future could be improved. So as always, stay tuned to the Your Personal Bank Show, or contact us at yourpersonalbank.com.
Listen Tuesday at noon and Thursdays at 1 for more information on Your Personal Bank. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and baseline of credit rates may charge. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.